Welcome to the Shatterpoint. I'm your host, Force Windu. Today, we'll be continuing our series on the 5 stages of red pill grief. And while it is a kind of a spin on an old concept, the idea is to relate the 5 stages of grief to that which happens to us when we are given red pill knowledge, particularly when after we have digested the red pill and begin to actually see the world for the way it is rather than the way that we want it to be. So we've already gone through the first 3 stages. The first stage being denial, the second, anger, the third, bargaining, and then the fourth is now depression. Now, before I go any further, I am not a healthcare professional. I am not a trained clinician. If you are feeling any of these symptoms as I am listing them, please reach out, talk to a healthcare professional, talk to a friend, get out of the house and do something nice for yourself. Go for a walk. If you're feeling depressed, please reach out to someone. Please talk to someone that you would trust or would care about how you're living and how you're doing. Also, you should see the hotline for the suicide prevention hotline is up here, because that is definitely a permanent solution for a temporary problem. And while there are times when you may feel that that's something that you may want to do, I recommend that you don't. Now, I can't recommend that strongly enough. And although I don't necessarily have moral problems with it, I'll be really honest with you. I think that there is a place and a time for it, but I don't think it's a reasonable substitute for problems that can be solved and need to be worked through so that we can grow, heal, and develop. And I think it takes a lot of fortitude to push through those trying issues in life. But I digress. So, when we start talking about depression as it relates to the red pill, we've already gone through denial and anger and bargaining, and now we're right. And the key for this particular stage is that it can kind of take you back to denial, because you're depressed, you're hurting, you're emotionally hurting, you're feeling disenchanted, disengaged, disenfranchised, you're feeling dissociated, and you're going to go back to denial, back to the way things were before your traumatic experience or your loss. So once you go back to that denial part, you can kind of try to wiggle your way in through denial, and then you're just going to be working right through the stages over and over again. Now, one of the things, common misconceptions about depression is that it's just a sadness. That's not true. And of course, there are different types of depression. There's clinical depression, there's situational depression, and there's overlap in those metrics. But please understand, not every form of depression is necessarily need for hospitalization. But I will say that every form of depression signals us that we have some need for healing. So with that, if you're a person who has experienced depressive symptoms such as sleeping way too much or not enough, fatigue, chronic fatigue, you just can't seem to get your energy together, you just can't seem to have an interest in anything, you have a lack of motivation or interest in the mundane or even just in things that you. Sometimes it manifests itself in a lack of self-esteem or not really caring for yourself. You just don't take the care of yourself that you would normally feel, be attentive, the level of care that you would normally give yourself, trouble focusing or making decisions. And I guess it deteriorates from there into feelings of helplessness and then finally self-harm. So those are some of the key things that we want to watch out for. And self-harm can be passive or it can be active. So a passive form of self-harm would be binge eating, or not taking care of your body in the way, or smoking or doing drugs, believe it or not. And that's both passive and active simply because of the psychological dynamics that go through it. I won't go through that in this video. Again, I'm not a healthcare professional, but there are ways that we do things without doing things. You can be passive aggressive with yourself, which is actually one of the causes for anger, one of the causes for depression, because one of the things that I've learned over time is that depression is in part anger turned inward. So sometimes, and with regard to the red pill knowledge that we've come to, and then feeling experiencing these grief or this loss, you can see how coming into this space, getting red pill knowledge, understanding that things weren't the way you were told, that you might have been lied to, misled, taken advantage of, led astray, run amok, etc. And now you have to reconcile this. And then the first stage of denial, you may not even be ready to deal with the fact that you were lied to. You may not even be ready to deal with the fact that there are no victims, only volunteers. You may not be ready to deal with the fact that you saw the signs, but you ignored them anyway. You may not be willing to accept those things, so you go through the denial and then the anger, and then the anger part is where it gets you, because if you don't want to take the anger out on the people who actually committed something or violated something, your trust, violated your standards, or just simply violated a relationship they were in with you, if you don't want to express that to them, or if you don't have a healthy way or legal way to express that to them, sometimes you can turn that inward. And that's where a lot of our depression may come from. So we have to be very mindful of how we deal with conflict resolution, and also being able to put anger in its proper place. Anger is not wrong. It's anger deciding how you conduct yourself that is wrong. Your reactions to anger are usually more incorrect than the anger itself. Anger is simply an emotion. And which brings me to a little bit more of exposition of why this is such an important series, is because while we tout ourselves as logical beings, we can forget the humanity or the emotional part of us, or the part of us that has feeling. And that's usually the short game. That's where men usually really fall short, because they haven't been trained how to deal with their emotional life. And it's not them be a sweet, cuddly, soft, feely, touchy kind of channel. That's not really what this is about, but I wanted to demonstrate that I embrace the whole of the man, whole of the person, whole of the woman, whole of the child. So I think we cannot ignore that part without and still value or comprehend the whole person, your anima and your animus, the balance, the yin and the yang. We have to comprehend there is a synergy between the two, even within the person in itself. The person themselves has positive and negative attributes, positive and negative energy. It has male and female energy and male and female concepts. And just as those within ourselves, as above, so below, I'll say. So without going too far with that, I just wanted to touch on that. Thinking about depression, it is lower than anger on the vibratory scale, which is right next to helplessness. So if I had to go from the bottom, helplessness, and then go up at depression, and then anger would be right above it. There's no coincidence that these three energy levels are at the bottom, at the least productive, and as a matter of fact, they're actually destructive. Now, again, I said anger is not necessarily evil. It is not. But unfortunately, what happens is, because people are more emotional creatures than they want to let on, because they are affected more by their emotions than they really want to admit or confess, especially men, you can be out of control. You can be caught in a cycle where you react to your emotions rather than respond to your emotions. Reaction denotes you're not in control. To react is you're only doing something because of external stimulus. You're only reacting to external stimulus. We don't want you to react to that. What we'd like to see you be able to do is to respond, meaning, and even sometimes a response is no response. So that's where it becomes very important and imperative to work through these stages, because if they're nothing else, they're recognition. There's simply a way to know where you are, and you can have a map for your internal work based on the situations that you're going through, whether it be grief, like in this series, and then break those down into what am I actually feeling, and then how do I respond to my actual feelings. So that's very important. And depression can be very debilitating for people. It's rampant in today's culture, and I believe that's because we are out of balance. We are spiritual beings having a physical experience, and because of that, we can sense the disharmony and the off energy that we're manifesting and perpetuating in this reality. Without going too far into that, if you are a person who's come to Red Pill Knowledge recently, and you see this cycle of denial, anger, bargaining, depression, take note of it, but don't give up. And I also want to encourage some of you brothers out there, because time is coming and is now here where we may be called upon to really interact with brothers who actually do have these feelings, who can't shake that feeling. There are men who have killed themselves because they could not handle the truth as we know it. They could not handle the digestion of the red pill. They could not pay the price for what they know. Not everyone can handle it. There are people who will go back and want to be in denial, and some people who will just stay angry for the rest of their lives and develop bitterness and hatred. Some people will continue to try to get on that hamster wheel of trying to bargain their way through a situation that can't be repaired the way that they're trying to. And then there's some people who will stay in a perpetual state of depression. And believe it or not, depression is actually painful. It is physically painful. So if you're a person who's experiencing depression, it may not be, it may not be like hitting your finger with a hammer, but it'll be a dull sense or ache in your chest and your gut, typically. So, and it can manifest through your shoulders, up through to your head, give you headaches, migraines, and so forth as well. So depression can be very debilitating if it's not found out and dealt with. And one of the most effective ways that I found to deal with depression, having had experienced it myself at times, is deal with the problem. You cannot deal with depression without dealing with the issues that are the catalyst for it. Even as far as people who get so clinically depressed that they harm themselves or take their own lives. The fact is, when people self-harm, whether it be through cutting or abuse, substance abuse, sometimes they just want to be able to control the pain that they're in. They want to be able to say when it hurts enough, or they want to be able to say, well, I'm in control of this. And then unfortunately, sometimes when people go so far as to take their own lives, they just say, I just want to feel better. As a matter of fact, even if I don't feel better, I'm tired of hurting. And that is a very challenging place to be. And it's a very hard place to communicate, particularly for men. It's a very hard place. It's a very hard thing to communicate to another man that you're vulnerable, be vulnerable to another man or a woman and say, I'm really feeling this. I'm really dealing with this. It is a terribly humiliating thing. But I would encourage you, brothers, if any one of you or you know someone who's dealing with depression, please don't look at it as a weakness. Simply look at it as perhaps, if it's not so much if it's not a clinical, if it's not diagnosed, just a way that they're not necessarily dealing with what's going on in their lives. Sometimes it's right in the front of your mind and right apparent, and other times it's subconscious. But again, not a healthcare professional, and I recommend that you, please, if you have any of these symptoms, like I talked about sleep disorders, whether it be too much or not enough, fatigue, chronic fatigue, where your diet's cool and everything, but you're just always tired, you never have energy, you're lethargic. Whether you're not taking care of yourself like you normally would, you're not bathing like you would, you're not cleaning yourself up, take care of yourself, shaving, shining, shower, shaving, and or trouble focusing, making decisions, and becoming indecisive, or if you feel hopeless, if you are having thoughts of self-harm, please reach out to someone. Please reach out to someone. Hopefully there's people in your life that care enough about you. If not, hopefully there's people in the manosphere. Just get on the panel. There's stuff going on around the manosphere all the time. And sometimes it can make you feel worse, I know that, but the reality is presence. And if nothing else, you can express how you're feeling. So I would recommend that. But beyond that, this concludes the 4th stage of grief, which is called depression. I'll be following up with the 5th and final video with regard to the 5 stages of grief. These are based on the Kubler-Ross model. There are other models out there, but this is the model I chose to use. And well, I'll see you in the next one. And please like, share, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. And until next time, may the force be with you.